Can we agree the minutes for the meeting held on the 9th of December 2024 as an accurate record?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications, and I would like to remind everyone on the committee guidance of the conduct of the business. So we've got two applications on this evening's agenda, and they will follow the same process. So the case officer for each application will present, and then at the end of which members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions and receive responses or seek clarification. And then thereafter, objectors, the applicants, anyone living within 100 metres, and a ward councillor or councillors if present will have up to 3 minutes to present, and then on each case committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and then we committee members then have an opportunity to then re-refer to the case officer, and then we go into deliberation and vote on the matter. Okay, so without further ado, if I can find the actual, yep, here we are. No, is it further back? Oh, here we are. Yeah, 6.1, beg your pardon, I'm just ahead of myself. 1 to 4 Plantain Place, Crosby Row, London SC1, pages 13 to 100 on the agenda back and the addendum report. Can I invite Andre to present, please? Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Chair. The application involves the demolition of, a part demolition of the existing structure, which includes commercial floor space and 2 residential homes. And it is proposed to construct roof extensions and infill the spaces between the existing buildings to provide additional commercial floor space and 3 flats. I just want to give you an idea of the context. Unfortunately, the slides don't have the addresses, but the site is outlined in red there, and properties in Crosby Row is situated at the top of the screen, with numbers 17 on the right-hand side, where it says Plantain Place, and then 19, 21, 23, 25 and 27 is the rest of the terrace. And then you have the commercial property Baden Place on the left-hand side, and out of the screen is Ballon House to the bottom of the site. So those are all residential properties, apart from the grey area in between the red line, which is part of 21, 23 Crosby Row, and I think it's also it's right next to Plantain Place, but mostly commercial residential properties surrounding the site. And then the next slide, this is the proposed development, but it gives you a visual of the properties I described. You can see the residential on the right hand side of the screen. I can use this. So that's the residential, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27. That's the commercial property to the north, and this is a big block of residential units there. And out of screen is another residential block. So hopefully...
Sorry, you missed the main residential...
No, sorry, sir, you can't interrupt. No, but please don't interrupt because committee members will necessarily pick that up. Okay, so please.
Yes, I just want to point out that this is also residential with on other.
Can I just say, just for proceedings going and for the effectiveness and efficiency of this meeting, please do not call out. There is a procedure and a protocol by which I went through right from the outset of the meeting, and please respect that. Okay? Thank you.
So I just want to go back to the this. So this is the site I referred to earlier as well, which is 2123 Crosby Row. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the context, which is really important, because it's a very difficult site, even when you are on site, to get a perspective of. So you really have to see it from above. I went to number 25, and there's some photos which I took from there, and I went into the commercial space as well. So I got a real good perspective from the other side, from that view and from there of the site. So let me continue with the presentation. So this is the slide which shows you what parts of the site will be demolished. That's the commercial space that will be demolished, and these two blocks are the existing flats that will be replaced on the right-hand side by commercial. That's a 4-story extension, and that's a third-story extension there, which is a sawtooth design, and that is a 4-story purely residential block that will be built on that side of the site. So this is just another view of the site, which I described earlier. And this is Plantain Place, where it actually starts. The site starts at this point. So it's set back between 17 and 19 Crosby Row. And you can see the residential block to the west in the background, and this is the site there. This is actually an extension which I believe was approved about 10 years ago. This is the site viewed from the southwest, and this is a view from the northwest. So you can see that's the single-story roof sticking out there, and that's the residential unit, residential there, commercial on the first and second floor, and those are neighboring properties, which I believe is up to 5 stories in height. This just gives you a broader view of the context in terms of heritage. So the green buildings at 2527 Crosby Row are listed buildings, and the yellow are local listed. So that's the commercial property to the north. And then this is the site itself, which has 2 local listed buildings, and that is 17 and 19 Crosby Row. And you can see some distance away is the conservation area, and there's another conservation area to the east as well. I'm just zooming in a little bit from the previous slide. So you can see this is the site. So the site starts, the site starts at this point and runs back. You can see that's the existing courtyard of the single-story commercial property, and those are garages associated with the block Bellin House to the west. I just listed the broad objections received. So we consulted in the neighbouring area, and we received a total of 40 objections. So we had 2 consultations. The first consultation brought in 27 objections, and the latest consultation, which was done December last year, we received an additional 13 comments. And all these objections have been addressed in the officer report. That's just again to show the existing 3-story building and the single-story element with the residential and commercial. So that will change to the increased in floor space, in commercial space, and one additional residential unit. So the existing mix of units is one studio flat and one two-bedroom flat, and the proposal is for one two-bedroom flat and two one-bedroom flats. You can see the increase in floor space of 482 square meters, and that would equate to approximately 50 more employment positions on the site. In terms of the quality of the residential space, it meets all standards, bar the a shortfall in storage in one of the units. So the requirement is 2 square meters, and they only provide 1 square meter. But in general, that will be acceptable, as the overall unit would be of a good size. There's a shortfall of 3 square meters for private amenity space per flat, plus for all developments for flats, there needs to be a communal private amenity space of 50 square meters. So the calculation for the shortfall comes in at just over £12,000, and that will be secured through the Section 106 legal agreement. The site is triggers policy P1, which is affordable housing, and for smaller sites, the policy requires a calculation for a contribution, because these units don't usually get provided on these small sites, affordable units. So the calculation is £105,000. It is procedure to ask for a viability assessment by the applicant, which in this case was submitted and reviewed by our consultants, and it was agreed that there is a deficit in this case, almost £1.4 million. So there's no contribution required in this case. In situations like this, we have a late stage review mechanism, which is included in the Section 106. So that will be reviewed at a later date. The design did have a very small change, as the objectors pointed out. You can see on the left-hand side, that's the commercial unit. There was I would say, from a design point of view, it's referred to as a kink in the roof. So it's just to soften that edge. And you can see this is the view from the south. That's the gap between Ainsford House and the residential block Baylen House. You can see on the left that kink in the roof design, and the sawtooth design for the rest of the site there. The existing height viewed from the west, you can see there the single-story element is about 4 meters in height, and the 3-story element with the residential on the top is approximately 9.2 meters. And this is the view from the southwest. And just to point out, that's the commercial unit on the left, and that's residential, and the listed building 25 and 27 is visible in a view, as you can see there. And this is the proposed west elevation. You can see the height going up to roughly 14 meters for the residential element. Those are balconies facing west, and that's a balcony on the first floor there. And this is the commercial element, roughly 13.5 meters in height. You can see it compares to the commercial unit on the left of just almost 13 meters, and 5 Plantain Place is the residential unit, which is this one here, which is about 17.5 meters in height. Just turning into some concerns raised on security and security by neighbours. You can see this is the entrance of Plantain Place, and this is the entrance to the commercial. This is the residential entrance, and you have a L-shaped corridor, which is about 9.5 meters down this way, and then another 9.5 meters there, and then this is the about an 8-meter corridor to the lift. These are the stairs going to the upper floors. We did consult with the Metropolitan Police, and that is in the addendum. Officers actually preempted a secure by design condition just as a reaction to the objections that came in. But we did now consult with the Metropolitan Police in the last week, so that's in the addendum. And they suggested these two conditions, which we already had in condition 9. Basically, you can see in the addendum they gave full comments on the scheme, and they think there's a solution. They also mentioned that there's only 3 flats, so in a sense, and with the design, the applicant, in some extent, addressed their concerns already. There's that's the full comment there, which is just an extract from the addendum. Turning to design, you can see this is on the left-hand side is 17 and 19 Crosby Row, with the site in the background. That distance from the front of 17 and 19 Crosby Row is approximately 18 meters to the foyer there. And on the right-hand side is a close-up of the site. I think the next slide should give you the distance. That's the 2D view of the distance between the new development and the front of the building. So it is set back quite a distance from the street. And this is the a view, same view really. That's the view with the trees which are in place, but on the right-hand side is just for clarity. Not that the trees are going to be removed, but just to give you an idea of the view from the southwest. So that's the tallest element there, and it steps down from the front. And these are the locally listed buildings 17 and 19, and further down you can see 27 and 25 and 27, which are the listed buildings. So the addendum also includes further comments from our design team. Objectors raised issues about the harm on the heritage impact, and in cases, and the NPPF does refer to where less than significant harm to the heritage impact it identifies officers would need to look at the public, weigh it up against the public benefit. So we just confirmed with our design team again in the last few days, and as reported in the officer report, it's confirmed there's no harm identified to any heritage assets. So there's an explanation in the addendum just to clarify that point. This is the view from Baden Place, the commercial property. They have a 1 meter gap, or a 1.5 meter gap, as you can see on the left-hand side, between the actual facade and the neighbouring property. So that's, or the site, which is a 1-story building at the moment. And you can see on the left, this is the residential block going up 3 stories above the existing single story, and there's a gap of about 4.2 meters between those two properties. Now, officers do recognize that there will be an impact on the outlook from the upper floors from the commercial unit. But a gap of 4.1 meters is fairly significant, but we do recognize that there will be a sense of enclosure to that existing property. But on balance, we think that it is acceptable given that there's an increase in floor space on the site, efficient use of land, and the increase of one residential unit as well. This slide shows the relationship between the office building here, that's on the second and third floors, and this is 5 Plantain Place, which has a balcony. There's pictures further on in the presentation which clearly shows this facade at the neighbouring property. But officers are recommending a condition for obscured glazing. We can't say how far it will need to go, but we will look at that in detail when we discharge a condition for obscured glazing. And this is the same principle, but this viewed from the new flats. So all the elevations have windows which are roughly 6 and just over 6 meters at an oblique angle to the terrace at the back of 5 Plantain Place. And only one of the units has a balcony at this location. The other balconies are on the west elevation. So officers are recommending a condition for obscured glazing, a privacy screen as well on that elevation. And if needed, it could slightly turn the corner as well. Daylight and sunlight was also one of the issues raised by objectors, and officers assessed the daylight sunlight report. Number 5 Plantain Place was the property that was affected most. There were 26 windows tested, and about 23% of those windows, which equates to 6, failed the vertical the daylight test, vertical sky component. So this is the west elevation of 5 Plantain Place. You can see there's a balcony there and one there as well, and then your living, I think that's an open plan living, dining, kitchen, and you have your residential units 2 floors on the top as well. So the property will come up to, or the extension at the site will come up to roughly that level there, and will sit at that point. So it won't be in front of this facade, but it will be on enclosing it in a sense, or on the sides. So these are the windows you can see there, W456, and in terms of vertical sky component, guidance stipulates that an increase of 20% is generally acceptable, but any loss of daylight beyond 20% would be noticeable. The red areas are windows which will be reduced by about up to 30%, and the other 3 windows on the first floor, those 2 windows on the first floor, that window on the second floor would see a loss of up to 40% of daylight. Now that is, in a sense, just to remind members, that is guidance, and the recommendation is, or the guidance is, that it should be used flexibly. In this urban location, this is generally what you would expect to happen on a site like this, central London, and it is ultimately efficient use of urban land. This is, just to give you an idea, this is the first floor of 5 Plantain Place. Now this is historic information I have here. I don't know if this is actually the layout as it is, but objectors can perhaps just clarify that point, but one would expect this is roughly your living space here. With the 3 windows, you have a window on that side as well. And these are the 2 floors that would be most affected by the development. And you can see these 2 windows there in yellow are the windows at the back. There's a window there. It seems to indicate a bedroom, and this historically was a live-work unit, so perhaps this is also a bedroom window. The next is overshadowing. So an overshadowing study is usually required for all private amenity spaces. You can see that in this case there's only number 21 Crosby Row, which is this one here, which receives a little bit of sunlight on the 21st of March, which is the date used for these calculations, and that would reduce to 0 as a result of the development. But this is the rear garden of number 25, which you can see there, which is this one. Give you an idea of the existing situation. You can see currently it doesn't receive any sunlight on the 21st of March, and the development will be in this location here. But I would imagine that 5 Plantain Place, this 5-story building, is probably playing a role currently in sunlight in those locations at the moment. So in conclusion, overshadowing isn't really something which is that the development is affecting or too much, because it's already significantly enclosed and overshadowed as it is. We also looked at amenity, so our environmental protection team recommended conditions, which is standard for these type of developments to protect the amenity of future occupiers and also neighbouring properties. Now, the addendum refers to the applicant stating that at the moment there's no plant proposed or positions confirmed. Hence, we have a standard condition just to ensure that background noise doesn't cause loss of amenity to neighbouring properties. We also agreed on issues to be covered in the Section 106 legal agreement, which I referred to earlier, the affordable housing late stage review, and then the shortfall in communal outdoor space and private outdoor space. Our highways team also recommended any repairs necessary if needed, and we also have restrictions on parking permits, which is the general approach in locations like this, and there's also a contribution required for monitoring and supervision of archaeology, and then just the administration fee. As I said before, the public benefits is additional commercial floor space, and then the change in mix of units and 1 additional residential unit. So in conclusion, we didn't have any land issues. The quality of accommodation is satisfactory, apart from the mitigation in the Section 106 for the payment, etc. And there is no harm to heritage assets as confirmed in the addendum, and in general it's recommended for approval subject to conditions and the legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive presentation, Andre. Much appreciated. Do members have questions? I saw Richard's hand go up first, so Richard followed by Adam. Go
Thank you.
ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some questions about the local listing of this site. Just to understand, because it wasn't necessarily very clear, I mean, there was lots of images you shared, but I was having a little difficulty trying to understand what was happening to the existing two-storey warehouse building that's got that local listing. Because it wasn't, because the sort of slide we have at 26 sort of suggested there was a sort of big sheet of glass, but I couldn't really see what was behind that. Is the proposal that the currently local listed frontage is retained but ends up inside the building? Is that what the proposal is?
It is a difficult site to understand.
So I was looking at slide 7, which shows the current view down Plantain Place, which shows that view down there to that two-storey warehouse building at the end with the that's underneath that modern bit.
So that's
Yeah.
a three-storey building there, which
Yeah.
is the site, which
Yeah.
is part of the site.
But that building at the back of the site,
This is also part of the site.
yeah,
That-
but
that
the
in the
two-storey element below that,
back-
Andre,
so
yes,
so-
that,
so
yeah.
all the brick will remain.
Right, but it's inside the building rather than outside the building in the future, is that right? Inside that kind of, it's
Yes.
covered, yeah.
Yes, yes. Let me find the floor plan. Yeah, so effectively, if you imagine that space in there.
Yeah,
So the walls will remain.
right,
Where's the floor plan? That's the floor plan. Unfortunately, it's not the entire floor plan. But yes, so those listed those structures there will remain.
right,
On the
okay,
inside, and then that's
Yeah.
the lobby, that's the glass.
yeah. And how obscure is that glass? Because it looks as if it's quite difficult to see through from, and I know obviously that's sometimes how these images look. It's not necessarily a, you know, there's
So it's go to page 26 then.
the CGIs sometimes have a limitation of this, but I'm just wondering how much you can see through to those brick elements from the street. Because it doesn't look from there as if you can see anything, but that might well be the quality of the CGI.
You've got a gate as well. You see, you've got Plantain Place there.
Yeah,
So if the gate is open, maybe that's something we can just ask the applicant, because when I went to site, you have to go through that security gate. So the gate is usually closed.
but if you're walking past Crosby Road,
Yes.
you can look down there.
Yes.
And okay, there's a gate in front of it, but you can
Yes.
see through that gate.
Yes,
It's
that's
not a
right.
solid gate. Yeah.
Yes.
So you
yes.
can see through to that image that you showed, the
Yes.
earlier image that was shown there. So really just to understand, can you see to what extent will you be able to see through from Crosby Road to that brickwork with this sort of glass frontage on top of it?
Well, it's
front.
it's not obscured glazed, so I would imagine it's just normal glazing.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, the reason I'm asking all of this, and sorry if it's a bit technical, is, I mean, I did, because it was locally listed, I did check what the local listing said. So local listing says it's a later 19th century two-storey stock brick warehouses with plain parapeted fronts with iron-framed windows. So that's the reason it's locally listed, is because those elements were seen as having some heritage value. And so, yeah, and the reason it's got some heritage value, I'm assuming that's the only description we have there, so we don't understand who put it on the list or anything further than that. But I'm assuming it's because of that and the interplay with the two other local listed buildings, 17 and 19 at the front, was the reason that we have that local listing. So understanding how that changes in this is quite important, I think, for considering that heritage angle of this.
I agree.
Agree.
So we were in unison. But do you have any additional comments to address that?
Yeah, there's the assessment on. There's the assessment on paragraph 20. 98 of page 41 at the top and 20 at the bottom on the weight that should be given to the local listing, obviously, and the WACs that are proposed here. And then maintaining that balance to provide an improved facility, but at the same time retain some elements of the local listing.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And just to add, paragraphs 76 and 77 provide a bit more detail on what's retained and what's changing.
I think that's something that we can tease out a little bit further on in the meeting. Adam, would you like?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. First of all, to confirm for me, I think this is clear from the presentation, but access to this site, is that exclusively from Plantain Place, or are there any other entrances to this site?
That's the only answer.
Okay. And the Metropolitan Police comments, could you clarify for me the corridor that they're referring to, which is on slide 24, that is exclusively accessible to residents, right? It's not accessible to the office space as well, is it?
Only residents, yes.
Yeah, so
That's the entrance there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the entrance to the residents,
Okay.
and the other one is commercial there.
Yeah. And finally, the existing commercial space on this site, do you know if that's presently occupied?
It's best to ask the applicant.
Okay, I'll save that one for the applicant in that case.
Are there any additional questions? Sam, go ahead.
I was just going to ask one about the police element of it as well, and what they've recommended around the corridor and potential of CCTV. And I know you said that we already had planned to have conditions around there being a secured by design certification. How detailed can we be from the council's point of view in stipulating what has to be present in that certification? Can we say, for example, it needs to include the types of doors that the police recommend, or the CCTV, or is it more a case of, in general, this certification needs to come forward and it's sort of up to the applicant and the police to work out the detail of that?
That is usually the case. That is usually the case, unless we can get some legal advice on if we could stipulate. But I would imagine all those elements would be in the certificate. But
Okay.
On an application, so the proposed conditions require the written approval of the local planning authority. So on a discharge application, you would expect the local planning authority to consult with the Metropolitan Police to see if their concerns have been addressed in order to receive the certification.
Thank you. So it's interesting that slide 25, because this is an area of concern for me as well, that the police have said that the length of the corridor is a minor cause for concern. Can we go back to that slide, so to slide 24? So just walk me through this corridor, sort of virtual 2D corridor. So we've got 9 metres, virtually 9.5 metres
yes.
from to the first right angle, that corner.
Yes.
Then a further 9 metres to the next right angle.
To the stairs going up.
To the stairs.
Yes, and
But then if one
8
wants to go take the lift,
it's another 8 meters.
well, it's more than 8 metres, it's nearly 9 metres yet
Yes,
again, isn't
yeah.
it? It's 8.8. That is a long walk, isn't it? And then the police are saying, right, we've got to have mirrors. So they've suggested mirrors presumably at the first right angle but I would also probably suggest the second. And then also I've asked for an introduction of a couple of doors. Where would they go? Andre, please.
Well, my understanding is they're saying there's already doors.
Right.
So you've got one point of entry, so it's making sure that that is a secure door.
Yeah.
And then that's another, so you have to get through two secure doors,
Yeah.
and you could possibly then there as well, up the stairs. So I don't think they're talking about more doors.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the existing doors.
Yeah.
But we're talking about if you want to go to lifts, roughly 26 metre walk internal. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. If I may add, Chair, I think what they're obviously emphasizing here is access control to these doors. So residents will have those access codes to access the doors. And obviously all the arrangement would have to be discharged by a qualified.
Yeah. It's not, yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
crime officer.
Understood. It's not very conducive to. That is something that we can sort of take up further. But it's, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Further questions from colleagues? Therefore, invite the objectors, please. I've got Mr. Stephen MacDonald, who's recorded. Yeah, are you on your own, Mr. MacDonald? All righty. So you'll have up to 3 minutes to present. You're very welcome. You'll get a 30-second warning as those 3 minutes conclude. So.
Thank you,
yeah.
Chair. I speak on behalf of the residents adjoining the scheme in Plantain Place, Crosby Row and Ballon House, 40 of whom have registered their objections, and as you can see, many of whom are here this evening. I thank you, committee, for allowing us to speak and have our opportunity to voice the reasons for our objections. It's important that the committee understand that local residents are not opposed to development per se, and worked with the previous owners to facilitate the residential additions to Plantain Place 13 years ago. What we are opposed to is the overdevelopment of the site. The officer's technocratic planning report is a tick box exercise dismissing each and every one of our genuine grounds for objection. At no point have the planners stood back to consider the scheme holistically. We implore the committee to consider this scheme in the round. Firstly, neighbouring residents already live in a densely developed area and becoming more so with the recent additions of the cancer centre at one end of the street, and yet more to come with plans for significant high-rise development at Snowfields and Long Lane. Consequently, cramming in space for another 50 office workers into what is effectively our backyard will hem us in further. What's more, by the planner's own admission, the new development will materially reduce the daylight and sunlight to our homes. Furthermore, our right to quiet enjoyment will be affected by up to 120 office workers filing past our front doors through the one and only access point, or leaning out of balconies squeezed in at one point only 7 metres from our windows. Notwithstanding these detrimental impacts, planners justify this on flimsy grounds about space efficiency, but they are not the ones who will live in the shadow of this ungainly metal box. What is more, as residents, we cherish our local heritage, so does the council. It locally listed Plantain Place for its heritage value. This local listing was done since the application was submitted, yet no changes have been made to the design as a result. By the planning officer's own admission, the new development will completely hide the old buildings, so the distinctive charm of Plantain Place will be obliterated. We ask ourselves, why would the council approve a scheme that materially harms the residents and destroys an acknowledged heritage asset? And for what? No extra residential space, no additions to community amenity, no contributions to affordable housing. As the report states, the public benefits have not been set out. Yet the report asks you to approve this scheme for the sake of an extra 480 square metres of office space, the demand for which is not justified and the building is currently empty. On behalf of all the residents in and around Plantain Place, all of whom are in opposition, we entreat the committee to reject this scheme.
Okay, thank you. Oh, stay. Mr MacDonald, stay, because
right.
committee members may have some questions for you. Do you have any questions for Mr. MacDonald? Thank you, Sam. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I was going to ask about what level of consultation you feel as local residents that the developer has initiated with you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. None. It was only at fortunate Councillor Vanbe's late intervention that we got a meeting in November. The developers have not approached any of us at all during the process.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Adam?
Thank you, and thank you again for your presentation. Could you tell me if there are, as the scheme currently stands, amendments that you would want to see from it that would mean you could become supportive of it?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. As you can understand, we're not designers, but I think for us, the really important point is that so much of it is just too dense. The planners have said that it won't materially affect the amount of sunlight and daylight and the overshadowing. We already have a diminution of daylight and sunlight. We're already overshadowed. We do live in we know that. And yet so for us, it would be how do we actually set the scheme back so that there is actually more daylight and sunlight getting to our homes?
Thank you.
So the answer is no.
I'm not sure how you do that, Chair, with great respect.
Just on the present plans before us.
Yeah.
What's your response to Councillor Hood's question?
So in terms of what we would like to see in design changes?
No, in terms of what we have, we can only...
Right, well, I didn't think that was the question, sorry. So on the basis of the question, we're opposed to the scheme as it stands, yes.
Okay. But no further sort of mitigating conditions that could...
Not that we, at this stage, with having had no consultation with the developers, we could offer, because we haven't had that
Thank you.
That courtesy.
Okay, that's clear now. Thank you. Councillor Salmon?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I'm just looping back on what my colleague just said. You said that there was consultation, did you say 13 years ago? Was that something that, whatever happened then, did you like that scheme?
Yeah, no, well, that's what you'll see on one of the earlier slides. There is actually some residential units that were added to the top of the listed buildings, and the then owners and designers worked with us. There was about 12 residents worked with us to agree a scheme that was acceptable to us, because we actually liked the fact there was additional residential. There is no additional residential in this new development proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Mr. MacDonald, colleagues? No? All right, thank you very much, Mr. MacDonald. Can we now invite, or can I invite the applicant to come forward? I've got a Dr. Ian Baggott. Is that correct, sir? All righty. If you could kindly formally introduce yourself and state your role, and then, as you would have heard, you've got up to 3 minutes. You'll get a 30-second warning in advance of the completion of that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair, members.
Could you switch your microphone on, sir?
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee and everyone present. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I am the founder and the CEO of Addiston Group, the applicant. As background and context only, please, today more than 1% of people in my home city, Newcastle, live in homes developed by this business, and more than 200 businesses occupy our commercial property. Our affordable housing division will build more than 200 affordable houses this year. We care deeply about our developments and take a very long-term approach. We established a London office in Plantain Place some 7 years ago, and we're full of hope and enthusiasm to deliver some modest regeneration-focused projects in this borough. We submitted our pre-app for this application, the application being considered this evening, in July 2019. Indeed, we were invited to put forward a wider proposal, which involved Balin House and the adjacent garages owned by the council. Considerable time and effort was put into this wider vision over a 2-year period, but the ideas died when the regeneration officer, Dan Taylor, announced he was leaving his post. With the full support of the case officer at that time, we submitted a vastly scaled-down detailed planning application relating to our buildings only, in December 2021, with a determination deadline of March 2022. Since then, we have worked tirelessly with several successive case officers, each of whom have had their own ideas as to how our proposal should be tweaked, but all of whom have supported our application unequivocally. Despite these successive reassurances, we have continued to engage with the stakeholders and members of the community, despite what's been said this evening, to address their concerns, almost 3 years after the formal consultation period ended. As of today, we find ourselves owning a beautiful historic cluster of buildings formed around a small courtyard. Unfortunately, these buildings are unfit for safe or beneficial occupation by any business. The flats are also fall well below modern standards and are positioned at second floor level without lift access. In short, the buildings desperately need to be upgraded in terms of usability, accessibility and sustainability. As evidenced by the viability report, the buildings will cost more to upgrade to modern standards than they will be worth. So it is important to make the point that this application is not intended to generate any kind of margin or profit, but rather to enable the redevelopment, extension and upgrade of Plantain Place to modern standards. The floor plates are basically too small and dark, the walls are damp and the space is cold. The various buildings have EPC ratings
30 seconds, sir.
of E, D and C. We always struggle to let the apartments because they are inaccessible to anyone other than the fittest of residents. The business tenants we do have in Plantain Place would dearly love to stay put and grow their business within the additional space we have proposed to develop. This collaborative approach is the only hope we have of bringing the buildings up to modern standards. We genuinely feel that what we are proposing will make a wholly positive contribution to the locality. We have introduced almost 20 amendments to the original application over a period of in excess of 3 years and feel like we have done everything we can to address the concerns.
Your time is up.
Before I ask my questions, I'd invite you to finish everything you wanted to say. If there are any other points you wanted to get across to us.
That was it, thank you, but that was
okay.
Yeah.
If I can ask, and I've got a couple of questions. I'm concerned about the comments that we've discussed about from the Metropolitan Police. Could you help me understand how you plan on addressing those if we were to go on this application?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain that. I appreciate the corridors look somewhat unorthodox. The way Plantain Place operates at the minute is we did have a tenant, it was the HQ for Comptoir PLC. Now they've recently left because of space constraints, but one of the apartments was rented by them. So their visitors would use the apartment. And the plan with the mixed-use development is for some of the commercial operators to occupy, for either their staff or their visitors to occupy the apartment. But because of building reg standards, we have to have an independent corridor for the apartments. So the independent corridor is there in case it's needed. But in reality, if the apartments are occupied as kind of informal live-work apartments, then of course the corridor wouldn't be used on a day-to-day basis. But either way, we feel that the corridor, I can see it looks less than ideal, but it's not large in normal standards. Most residential blocks would have long corridors, and it could easily be made secure with video access systems and secure gates. The other point I'd like to make on that is that we have had some quite serious incidents at Plantain Place with people climbing over the fence, breaking into the units, and the police records will confirm this. And what we're proposing here gives us the opportunity to make it far more secure than I would argue it currently is.
Okay, and you somewhat preempted what my other question was going to be, which is on the the existing commercial space since that's occupied, but as I understand from what you said, you did have an occupier and they've recently left. Is that correct?
No, it's an eclectic mix, and but the floor plates, if you imagine, some of them are only 10 foot deep, and they're dark, and it's a single skin of brickwork. So it's a beautiful old building, but it's very difficult to keep it up to modern standards. It's very difficult to keep it let. So at the minute we have probably occupancy levels of around 50%, and that's how it's been since we bought it.
And the nature of these occupiers is that office space?
No, so we have a small. We have some quirky, a PR consultant, an author, the author of $1 Billion Whale. So we had some studios, physio and psychologists, this kind of thing. So it's very, very small scale commercial occupiers.
Okay, and would that change in the new development?
Yes, I think there's, so as I've said, some of the existing businesses, including Comptoir, would have loved to have worked with us. And I fear, because there's no way this stacks up on a speculative basis, there's no way we could empty this building and redevelop it and expect to get any kind of return. It would be commercial suicide. So the idea is to redevelop it in conjunction with some of the existing tenants. I'm very sad to hear the objections tonight. We have really tried our best over a 3-year period. It's a difficult, and I'm also very. It's not a pleasant environment. I've got 20 people laughing and mocking. We are trying to do the right thing here. We need feedback from the case officer, and we need feedback. We're trying to redevelop this building and bring it up to modern standards.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Well, can I just ask, why do the objectors feel that they haven't been listened to and reasonably consulted?
Well, we have.
Question to me, Chair? Or to
No. You've had your to.
Well, we have
Mr.
tried.
Baggett.
I mean, we really have tried, and we interact with the residents over maintenance and day-to-day issues. I'm not based in London. I've come down from Newcastle for this meeting this evening. My colleagues work with the residents. We feel, this application, I've mentioned the dates, 2019 was the pre-app. We did workshops then. There was a formal consultation procedure. We've done workshops more recently when the consultation period was reopened. We really don't know. When you ask the objectors, is there anything they would like to see changed, they didn't have an answer. So it's very difficult for us to. We know that this building needs improved, but we don't have any. We don't have any firm ideas or firm feedback as to how we could improve this application, and all along we're trying to make it viable. So we don't know, what materially, what would they like to see that's different. The building needs to be upgraded. EPC, I mentioned the EPCs, the accessibility issues, the floor plates, but we haven't had any direct feedback as to what specifically they would like to see change, other than they just don't want to develop them.
Well, no, I think this evening they said that in principle, they weren't against development, and they understand the sort of constraints of the area and its heritage. But I think it's the proposal before us that they're against because of the impact. This is the sense I've got from the objectors. This is not, my view. This is the sense I've got from the objectors when they presented, that the current design will have on their properties.
But with respect, Chair, the question was directly asked, what changes would you suggest? And there weren't. And we've been trying for 4 years, so we've been engaging through the proper processes. 2019 was a pre-app, and we haven't had.
Right. Okay. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but ultimately they're against the current design before us. Okay, we've established that. Richard, Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions. The first one I'm going to go to is back to the question I asked officers earlier. Interested in terms of the impact on the listed building facade. So to understand a little bit more about to what will the view of this site be from Crosby Row, looking through the that current gateway we've got at the moment? Will you be able to see the 2-storey warehouse building in the back through the building?
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer that question. We love the look of this building. We love the courtyard, and the whole design here has been based around a structural glazed facade, which would be better for security. it could be a real feature. I walked out of London Bridge Tube Station this evening with all the exposed brickwork and the structural glazed facades. At present, we have a 1980s, 90s designed wrought iron fence, a gate with ivy. So if you were to walk past Plantain Place tomorrow, you wouldn't see a clear view of the brickwork and the windows, on the steel frame windows. With a structural glazed facade, we could make a real feature of it with warm light on an evening. It would be significantly more visible than it currently is. And please, with respect, I understand it's a locally listed building, and the local listing has been introduced since we submitted our application. I understand.
It has, although the report does point out that there was some previous status from 2012, wasn't there? So it has been recognised for a while locally, admittedly not by any other body than the local authority, of having some heritage merit.
But I really think it could be a beautiful, especially in the dark, a clear structural glass opening with the right lighting could really, make a statement, make it look, and at the minute you can't really see it because we've got the secure gate and ivy and a sign. Please take a walk past it.
I have. Yes,
well,
I do know the site.
Yeah.
But thank you for the advice. Just to be clear, and it's both stories of the original warehouse building that's being retained. Is that right?
Oh yes, yeah, the whole they exist. Okay. Yeah, the whole building. But the idea is the courtyard would be enclosed.
Thank you. So the sort of atrium space, that's a sort of full height, isn't it? It's not.
Exactly.
It's not got a mezzanine or anything in there.
So full height.
Right.
Full height atrium, with lighting.
Thank you. That's helpful for
we really think it could be beautiful.
Okay. That brings it. So, second question I wanted to ask was around. I mean, you're obviously a businessman. You talked about how most of your business is in Newcastle. Mm-hmm. We're being told that this is this misses the viability by 1.4 million. Mm-hmm. That sounds a remarkably generous investment you're making into this for something that's a commercial proposition for you. So just
well, it's not a commercial proposition. Well,
in that case, could you explain a little bit more about why you're intending to do this? Because it does.
Well, businessmen like myself, I quite often do things for purpose. We bought this building at the wrong time and paid the wrong price for it. We're underwater by quite a considerable amount. We submitted this application 3 years ago. We conceived of it 4 or 5 years ago when we thought that we might get some improvement in values, and since then build costs have gone up 30 to 40% or 20 to 30%, and values have come down. And really, we see this as a way of bringing this building up to modern standards, making it lettable, and mitigating our losses. It's as simple as that. And I will say this evening, there is a strong chance that even if we were to obtain consent, we would struggle to do anything with this. This is just, we feel we've paid our fee, we've worked very hard, we've worked tirelessly with several successive case officers, and, we feel we're entitled to have the application determined. So this is not a commercial profit-making venture. This is us trying to dig ourselves out of a hole and make this building upgrade it, make these buildings suitable for the future.
Okay, I'm still struggling slightly with that explanation, but that's
well,
helpful.
when you pay too much for a building,
yeah,
you have to do your best to keep it occupied and to preserve its value. So we don't want it going down in value. There is no chance
about giving it more value, but spending more on it than that increase in value will be.
We wouldn't spend money on this on a speculative basis, but we would partner with existing tenants to improve it. So get a forward commitment from a tenant and then upgrade the space on the back of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and just to explain, I'm asking this to understand the question about the affordable housing contribution, because to me that seems strange that we're not getting anything out of it, but really just to try and get my head around why you appear to be making an investment here which is costing more than the return you'd get from it.
It's definitely costing more than the return we'd get from it. But if our property over the next 5 or 10 years goes down in value and ends up empty, then we have no choice but to make a further investment into it. to bring it up to standards. I mean, that's the way it works. With respect, that's the way it works.
Okay. So basically what you're saying...
It's a loser for us commercially.
Right.
It's a beautiful property, but it's a complete loser.
Okay, I get it. So you're basically saying in order to make the revenue, to make this sensible, you need to do this. But whilst on paper it might have... The paper values are based on full occupancy, but that's something you don't have at the moment. Is that a fair summary of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and also we have EPC standards to comply with, so we have to improve its sustainability. Over the next 10 years, if we can't do something with this property, the grade of tenant that we end up letting it to goes down and down, and effectively it becomes little more than storage or quirky kind of uses.
No, I think I get where you're coming from now. Just to return to the question about consultation. So we obviously have heard you set out how you say that you've made, in your view, best efforts to make consultation. We've heard clear feedback from local residents here that turned up to object to the scheme, that they don't believe that's the case. We obviously know about the meeting there was in November, which the objectors talked to us about. Could you tell us a little bit more about what the steps were before you put the application in to consult with the local community?
Well, so this dates back to 2021. So we followed the guidance of the case officer at the time. We held a consultation on site. We invited local members. We wrote to local residents. We wrote to local residents. Those who were anyone interested came along. We have photographs and records of the event. And as far as we were concerned, we did everything we could to comply with our obligation to consult. I'm sorry if people don't feel like we have consulted, but it's very difficult to know what else we're supposed to do. We've now done at least 2 lots of engagement, and we've had 3 years working with various different case officers to try and get this scheme to a position where it can be recommended for approval. And when we're genuinely not really sure what else we could have done. No one's asked us to take a level off or to change it. Whenever we've been asked to change anything, we've changed it. And then, the current case officer is recommending it for approval, and as far as we're concerned, we don't know what else we could have done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to return to something I asked earlier, just to help me get a more explicit understanding. So, with the flats that currently exist on the site, you said that they are rented out effectively to some of the businesses that were there, or that has been the case in the past.
They have been.
Yeah. With the new flats, could you confirm for me that it would be your intention that businesses that take up the commercial opportunity would rent those flats as well?
I think we'd like to have flexibility. So no, as I understand it, there would be no restriction on. There certainly currently isn't any restriction on how the flats are used. In fact, at some stage they were used for short-term lets, which didn't suit us, and it gave us all kinds of problems. But our preference would be for businesses that occupy Plantain Place to somehow make use of those apartments, whether it's their staff, because then we don't have that waste. In fact, if there was a way around that wasteful corridor, we would love to work with building regs planners, but unfortunately, as things stand, the apartments need an independent access.
But it would be fair to say that your preference would be that renters of the commercial property also take up some of the flats.
It works really well,
Yeah.
because it really does work well.
Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, none from you, Jen? Okie dokie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any supporters of the application that would like to present? No? We do have a ward councillor. Councillor Bambe, if you'd like to come up and formally introduce yourself, and then as per usual and norm, you've got up to 3 minutes and you'll get a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Joseph Bambe. I'm the councillor for Chaucer Ward. So you've heard the objectors talk about the loss of light, the density and the impacts on the heritage of the site. I just want to make a comment on why I called in this application with the support of my colleague. The reason why is I've been a councillor for coming up to 3 years now, and so I've started to learn and understand what is good practice when it comes to planning applications and where it works and where it doesn't. And I've learned that the reason why when you are designing a model on a site, the reason why you consult and you speak to residents and the people that are nearby and that are going to be most impacted is because when you are designing that, their feedback can feed into what you're designing, and so therefore when you get to the end stage, you don't reach this gulf, this impasse where you can't agree on anything because the model has already been designed out, and so therefore it's very rigid and it's too late to change. And that's what happened with this application. It came to me by the residents nearby that they had no consultation. So and I pushed on the applicants to meet with the objectors in Hughes Hall, and they met, and they obviously reached an impasse because by that point you've already designed a layout for the building, and so it's too late for any feedback to adjust. There's no flexibility there because you've reached the end of the cycle rather than the beginning. And planning applications that have worked and have been successful are those ones where right at the beginning of the process, you speak to residents, you get their feedback, and you continue that right the way through. And those are the ones that are usually the most successful and the ones that don't receive this backlash from residents nearby. And that didn't happen in this planning application, and that's why with the residents, I am also asking for you to vote against this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very succinct and within there. I'll take Adam, followed by Richard, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Van Bay. I'm reflecting on what we heard from the applicant about the current state of the site and how it's probably deteriorating in both value, and that will have an implication over time. I wonder if you could give me your thoughts on, if we reject this application, that site will deteriorate and then something else is likely to come back to this committee in a different form with a worse site to work with, whether of the kind of two outcomes of that, whether it may be preferable to approve this application on the basis that we might get something worse come back next time, whether you could give me your thoughts on that.
So I would say I disagree with the premise. I think approving this application is a sign that you can get something through planning committee without consulting with residents right through and getting their feedback right through the process, and so that sets a bad example. And so I would argue the opposite. Actually, I'd say it coming back would set a precedent that actually, if you want to go through and get planning committee approval, you really need to make a conscious effort with residents and not just doing the kind of box ticking exercises that's required, but really take a deep effort. And so that when you are designing your proposal, it's not just what you want, but it's what feedback from the residents has been taken on board. And so I would argue the opposite, really. I would say coming back is actually a sign of good practice, of an emphasis that we take consultation seriously and we take resident feedback and input seriously.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor Van Bay, for coming to present to us. I just wanted to go back on this point about consultation, because there seems to be two different stories we're getting on consultation here. We've heard from the applicant who said that there was some consultation. I think they said some meeting on site, I think they said around 2021, so sometime before the application was submitted, and then I think following, because obviously there was a bit of a break between there and the application going in, there was this later meeting that I think you instigated in November 2024 to look at this. But just to understand, because obviously you wouldn't have been a councillor in 2021, are you aware of that meeting took place, or what else has there been that you've been aware of since you've been a local councillor in terms of engagement on this, up to the point where you had this meeting in November? Because we're getting two slightly different stories in all of this. So as somebody who is not necessarily a neutral arbiter, but somebody who has that broader perspective, but useful to hear your views on that understanding.
So it's my understanding that there had been no communication up until that meeting in November 2024. There may have, again, and what I've seen with different planning applications, particularly minor planning applications, is there is usually something, like to tick and say you've done something, but in terms of substantial engagement and feedback, I would be pretty certain that that hasn't taken place. And I've seen this tactic before, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that had taken place in 2021, but I doubt any of the residents behind me would have been there. And so therefore, I wouldn't, maybe you can tick and say I've done statutory consultation, but I wouldn't say that's real consultation. And so the meeting that was in November was set up ideally to create some sort of agreement, to come some sort of mediation, but by then it was clearly too late, and so we reached this stage.
Okay, yeah, it's probably always best to look at everybody trying to look in these things coming from an open point of view, I think. Anyway, but we've heard from the applicant about some of the constraints about this site. Talked about the difficulty there is with the current buildings, why they do need to do something. We also, because I sort of spent a bit of a tortuous amount of time with the applicant trying to understand the financial case for what they were trying to do. So it does strike me that trying to do something else on this site might be very difficult to do. So really just to understand, because you're saying that you'd like the applicant to go away and come back with something better. Understanding what we've heard from the applicant in terms of some of those constraints and about the financials that they've talked about, just trying to understand what that might be, because unless there is something that is a viable proposition for the applicant to come forward through, that it's slightly a speculative thing, isn't it, to say come back with something better. So just to understand what your thinking is around that, and obviously I know you're not going to have technical answers to this, but try and understand what might be something that would be something that you'd be willing to, or you would think would get less opposition from the local community.
Yeah, and those concerns raised by the applicant are serious and real. I guess my priority as a ward councillor is more what development is being approved. Is it a development that contributes to the area positively? Are residents happy with it? Is it going to be a good contribution to the area? That over more kind of the upkeep of the business in their case. And so therefore, although that is something, you're right, there is no guarantee the applicant will come back. There is no guarantee that a better proposal would come forward in the future. But my concern is more, and this is the number one concern, has this application gone through due process? Has the applicant gone through due process in terms of improvements and changes? And is it a good contribution to the area that's going to bring out the area? And I'm not convinced by that. And so, although definitely we don't want the building to decline or decay, we definitely want something that's going to make the area more vibrant, it's going to contribute, it's going to be a success. I would argue the applicants should have done a better job of speaking to residents, of looking at the layout, and then bringing it to committee, having gone through all those processes, so that we didn't reach this point. But yeah, I do take the point that this could come back, this may not come back. That's a bit of the unknown.
Thank you. And I just guess my very final question is, you're asking us to object to this, and a lot of the points that you've made have been about process rather than planning policy, and obviously we have to make a decision based on policy rather than process. So just understand what the policy reasons you think we should be rejecting this.
I do think there are some serious concerns about the heritage aspect, and I know that's been highlighted by the objectors, and you asked questions about that. I do think that there is an impact. There is an impact in terms of the heritage side of things. I'm not entirely convinced that the mitigating impacts of the development are compliant. I'm not entirely convinced. I know it says that they are, but I'm not entirely in. And I think you also slightly confused about it almost being hidden. And I know the applicant said it brings out the heritage. I think, and I think the objectors would think that actually it does the opposite. And so I think on those grounds, particularly on the heritage side, that actually isn't quite right.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Councillor Van Bay. Are there any further questions for Councillor Van Bay, colleagues? No. All righty. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, do we have any further questions for Andre in terms of clarification or on this application? Adam?
This might be a question for legal rather than Andre, but I am concerned about the police comments and this corridor. I think I would feel a lot happier about it in the circumstances that the applicant described about these flats being somehow connected to the organisations that are renting out the commercial space. So I guess my question in there is about exploring some kind of condition that links the two. I think I'd be very concerned with this application if those flats were available for private rent and regular day-to-day usage, which would be very different from them being linked to the commercial properties where usage would be much more sparse.
And just to understand, your concern is, well, crime, essentially.
My concern is around crime, but I think I would be happier with the situation in the usage scenario that was outlined by the applicant, in that they're much more rarely used and they're linked to organisations that rent in the commercial properties, and whether there is a condition in there that we can apply.
Well, I suppose I think it is important to highlight the Metropolitan Police comments in full. As Andre said, they have recommended this condition. In paragraph 8 of the addendum, they said with only 3 residential units being served by this corridor, the inclusion of separate lobbies, and very little crossover between commercial and residential spaces, the developers have already mitigated a loss of the potential for crime and disorder. So, thinking about whether it would be reasonable, necessary, and proportionate on the basis of the evidence before you to impose a condition which would be relatively restrictive in the sense of who could live in the flats. I think to a large extent, it's a matter of judgment. I'm not saying it would be absolutely impossible, but if the concern is really crime and disorder, the statutory consultee comments don't provide much cause for concern, if I put it that way.
But perhaps, Chair, if I can explain my thinking on this. I'm concerned with the statement only 3 residential properties, and I have a problem with what I see as a compromise in my mind on security because of the low number of properties of concern that are in scope of this application. So I will need to, if we can't condition that in some way, I will need to reflect on how I will vote on this application.
I do have to say that I strongly share your view as well, which is why I instructed officers to seek the Metropolitan Police advice for this committee. Would you want to interject and say, and I think it would be unfair ultimately, and I share Michael's views, the legal officer's views on restricting the applicant in terms of who, although he did say it would be desirable, because obviously he recognises that that is an undesirable situation. But I just think, and I know it's not a sort of a planning consideration, but I just think that any potential occupants of those flats, should actually have a sense of well-being, and it should be, invitational, etc. And that contravenes that. You'll be sort of constantly in a state. Certainly, I would be in alert, heightened state of alertness, and who's walking, but if I hear footsteps behind me, who's in front of me, looking at mirrors, CCTV camera, etc. And it's a heck of a long walk on at the end of a, long day, which I know,
Yeah.
but it's just that whole sort of sense, notwithstanding all the other mitigating circumstances, which we'll come to, that have been put forward to make this application policy compliant.
So just
So what would you like to say?
So I reminded councillor, so the test for a condition, it needs to be necessary, relevant to planning, enforceable, precise and reasonable. So to have those tests in mind. And in particular, I suppose, would be necessary and reasonable, probably the most relevant. In theory, there could be a condition along the lines of the residential development hereby permitted shall not be occupied other than by occupiers who also occupy the B1 office use hereby permitted, or something similar. There would be a way of linking the two uses if you felt it was necessary. I suppose what I'm saying and asking is to carefully consider if this one corridor justifies imposing such a condition.
Would it be helpful to bring the applicant back to just reflect on that? Do you think that would be helpful?
Okay, yeah. All righty.
Chair, I've got a question as well, that might help a little bit, but
All right.
let's see.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps if I could give some background. So I mentioned that for 2 years we were considering collaboration with Southwark Council in relation to Balen Place or Balham Place. And you'll note the barbed wire fencing in the garages to the rear, and the idea was to improve the facade and the outlook for the residents in Balen Place, and also to give some active frontage. And the apartments in the envelope, the current envelope that was proposed, the idea was if there was active frontage into Balham Place, the apartments would be accessed via Balham Place, along with potentially some glazed frontage. So when the regeneration, I've forgotten his name, but I mentioned it. I mean, when he left, and that those discussions broke down, then it became necessary to introduce this corridor. And I think even if we were to agree to a condition that the apartments were only occupied by users of the commercial space, I fear that from a building regs and safety point of view, there would still need to be a separate access. So that a separate escape, actually, so they could still be accessed from the offices, but there might still need to be a corridor, or potentially there could be collaboration with the council to have an access for the apartments directly out into here. And that's how the envelope came about. There were 2 years worth of discussions, and this is why we had confirmation from 4 successive case officers that what we had proposed was acceptable. So we really feel it's very frustrating to hear that the residents are disappointed with process, because from our point of view we felt like we'd done everything we needed to the satisfaction of the case officers. But yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. If you could return to your chair.
Actually going to ask the applicant a question.
Right, oh
Sorry,
right,
would you mind
okay.
just for 1 second? If this got approved and you had people in place and things, what are the hours that people would be in the building? What hours would, at the commercial side of it, not obviously the flats, but what hours would people be? Are you expecting this to work sort of 24 hours? Or?
No, currently the tenants are just normal working hours.
Office hours.
So we don't really have any.
I was just wondering if there might be an overlap with people being in the offices when people are coming home late at night. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any further questions, colleagues? Councillor Livingston?
Yeah, apologies, this isn't on the same issue, and it's sort of going back to my issue about heritage values and things like that of the development. So I'm very much sort of up in the air about where I will fall on this, and it's kind of getting some answers on this point, which is really what this falls down on. And you know, in the questions with Councillor Vanvey said that as the policy reasons, he thought the heritage issue was the strongest one, and that does appear to me to be the case as well. So it'd be just useful to get officers' views on this, so that to help me weigh that up. And I know you've obviously been through it once in the report, but having heard the reflections that we've heard from the objectors, from the applicant and from the ward councillor, and the questions that we've had, just to hear your views on it, what can you do to reassure me that we're not losing a valuable heritage asset through this development? And you know, I have walked past there. You can look through the gate, and it is quite a nice courtyard behind there, you know, with some buildings with value. And I understand what the applicant was saying about, you know, perhaps if you put plate glass and things like that in front of it, it could be something different that might also have some merit. But it does feel like we're losing something through losing the openness of that aspect, as well as not necessarily being able to see those buildings in the way you can at the moment from Crosby Road. So just if you could talk that through for me, it'd be very helpful.
So perhaps if I, as it were, say what the legal policy position is, and then Andre can explain how officers have assessed the actual impacts, because it seems as if the concerns are mostly to do with the locally listed building rather than the designated heritage assets. So paragraph 216 of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, says the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. So there's not a particular test or weight, as it were. It's a matter of judgment as to any harm that you find. Officers' view in the report, and Andre can explain this in a bit more detail, is that the proposal would conserve the locally listed building and that there wouldn't be harm, but maybe, Andre, you can explain that in a bit more detail.
We did consider this point in detail, and that's why we have comments in the addendum. But it is quite a specific issue that's raised. It's just so it's just one local listed building, which is Councillor Livingston's concern. So the design officers looked at the scheme as a whole, as in the impact on neighbouring properties. But ultimately, and as I say, we did consult twice with our design team just to report to this committee, and they didn't raise any concerns. I think the emphasis is that all the walls will be retained, so you have an internal courtyard. I can't really say more than that.
Chair, if I might add, if we go to page 71 of our agenda pack, there is condition 11 that requires the submission of detailed drawings. So we could specify under condition 11 exactly what you want to. Yeah. So that's so condition 11 on page 71. So we could add, details of, the historic brickwork.
Okay. So
in detail. Yeah. So we can add details to that condition 11. So that is effectively a second part.
I think yes, it's about that, because it does strike me that we've got.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got three listed, locally listed buildings. We've obviously got a nationally listed building not far away as well. But it does strike me that the reason for that local listing is probably the interplay of all three of those, because you've got the two gateway buildings, 17 and 19, which then open up to the courtyard and Plantain Place itself. So yeah, I think having something there, maybe adding something in there about a condition about that, the public view from Crosby Row and what can be done to be mindful of that. I'm not sure what the wording is, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say here. It would be very helpful.
I suppose what I think you just summarised is the view from Crosby Row. Is that okay? Yeah. So details of the glazing in views from Crosby Row.
I think the applicant did mention lighting as well to highlight.
Can I just reiterate, it is a long distance, as in about 18 metres. So that's part of the argument from a heritage point of view. It is set back. So and the entrance is set back. It doesn't sit flush with the local listed building.
Okay, that's all been helpful. So can we just have some general thoughts in terms of where we're going with this particular application, colleagues? Shall I start with you, Jane, since you've said the least this evening?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Personally, I feel that the applicant was saying about the number of case officers he's had and the changes and the difficulties he's had, but I think this is an opportunity to improve the area, to improve this site. And whilst I respect all the concerns that colleagues have about the walk through to the flats, and it would be difficult to restrict because this applicant may not be the owner in in a couple of decades, to restrict the flats to just within the commercial. That would be, I think, a bit difficult. But the rest of it, I really don't have a difficulty with. I'm in favour of it.
Thank you. Councillor Hood?
Yes, I'm really umming and ahhing about this application. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote. The two things that I'm trying to weigh up in my mind are the concerns that I have about the Metropolitan Police comments, and I think I have a real issue with these flats if they are to be privately rented out, with that corridor being the way that it is and the concerns that we've discussed at length there. But I am weighing that against the comments from the applicant about the deterioration of this site and I guess the future implications of that. So I'm not certain how I'm going to vote on this one yet, but I have deep concerns about that corridor.
Thank you. Councillor Livingston?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, this is one where I've been sort of toing and froing a bit in my head. And clearly, I'm not going to apportion any blame, but it's clear there have been some difficulties in the consultation. It could well be that timing and the number of officers that Councillor Salmon was talking about has been part of that. But I do think that has created some difficulties. But as I said, my question to Councillor Vanby earlier, we need to look at this against policy rather than process. And I'm not sure what application would have come forward that was different materially from what we got at the moment if the consultation had been better. So for me, that's trying to work out, in that case, going at the policy issues. I certainly understand local communities' concern about density, but density in itself is not a planning issue, provided that the levels of density we're talking about here are not over and above those that are set out in the Southwark plan. There is an issue clearly about loss of daylight and sunlight. How material that is in the grand scheme of things, I think I think that on its own is not enough to sustain a refusal. And similarly, I think probably the biggest concern that I had, as you'd have guessed from my points was about what the impact on the heritage value was, because it is quite an attractive courtyard there, and clearly is a heritage asset. I think, given the points that were made about what we can do to actually condition that does help to some extent with that. And then finally, we've got this issue about the corridor. And the corridor, my maths might be slightly out, but I think basically that corridor is about, if you're walking around this room, it's about half the distance around this room, isn't it? From basically that wall to that wall, that wall to there. It's kind of what we're talking about, and it's about a metre or so wide, so it's quite pokey. So it feels less than pleasant. It feels like some of those corridors, if anybody's seen the substance that you sort of see in there, but hopefully none of the rest that's in the substance would be going on there. But that in itself, to some extent, this is a private let. I feel it's safe. It's just not necessarily pleasant, because the police have said with all these measures there, mitigation, actually they had some issues, but I think overall it's now safe with these measures. So I think, given all of those considerations, I am coming down on the side of agreeing to approve this application, Chair.
Thank you, that's helpful. Sam? Councillor Dalton?
Yeah, also recognise the weaknesses with the consultation that have been highlighted, but like Councillor Livingston, trying to think of it in terms of planning policy, as we have to do on this committee. And I know that may kind of sound technocratic, as I know was one of the words used, but it's just, I think, that's the planning system, isn't it? You've got to kind of consider things that way. It's how we have to do things. I think a few of the weaknesses in terms of planning policy have already been mentioned. I think on the light, I agree that probably not enough on its own to not approve it, and that it's outweighed by some of the other benefits, including the 50 extra jobs that would come from the scheme. I think that's one of the main benefits to come from it. That said, I think it's really important, given what we've heard from the police about potential for crime and what needs to be done, that secure by design certificate is put in, and I know we get to approve the details of that. I think if those specific things that the police have recommended around doors, types of doors, mirrors, potential CCTV can be included in that would be helpful, and I would mainly, I think that is the sort of best source of expertise we can have, what the police are recommending on this. Finally, I know one of the other things which isn't quite policy compliant is maybe a little bit more of a minor point, but the outside space, balcony space for the residential flats isn't big enough to be policy compliant. However, there's a financial contribution, as I understand it, from the developer to go towards other outside space, which hopefully we can ensure is kind of directly in that local area that those residents would be able to access. So I think there are a few weaknesses there, but we're obviously trying to mitigate that as much as possible. Just judging things on the planning policy side of it, I don't feel like I've got a strong enough reason to not approve it, which is how the system works. So I would vote to approve.
Just on Councillor Dalton's point on the secured by design conditions, it could be amended to say any application shall have particular regard to, and then the factors listed by the police, which means that any application would have to address those issues or it's going to be refused.
Yeah, would be supportive of that being included.
Okie dokie, colleagues. Similarly, I have grappled with this one, and I understand the urban element. I understand, the characteristic of the area, and so therefore it's inevitable that we're going to get applications coming forward which are going to have significant impact on existing residents. But I do still strongly believe that it's in this case, it's a cumulative, and it's cumulative in the wrong direction in terms of sunlight, daylight. There's significant loss on a couple of flats, 40%, between 30 and 40%. Notwithstanding the distance between buildings, the number of glazed windows that will have to be put in place to mitigate loss of to mitigate privacy and overlooking, etc. I do have issues with the corridor, irrespective of what the police have said, and I do think we do also have a duty of care in terms of sense and well-being, for duty of care for prospective residents occupying any units, and I think that would be lost somewhat with these current plans. Also I had an issue around the heritage, and you know, it's helpful to understand the conditions that we can submit and put forward and suggest as a recommendation going forward to protect that somewhat. So, yes, I'm inclined to reject. So I've done my numbers. So I would not like to put forward a motion to recommend. So if I could ask one of my colleagues to do so, and find a seconder, please.
Chair, I'm happy to do that. Is there any wording, or shall I just say?
Including the...
If you're happy to put forward a recommendation to approve in accordance with the conditions in the officer report, the addendum report, and also an added condition or amended condition on the view of the locally listed building, and amended secured by design condition. All of that?
All of that,
Yeah.
yes, all of that. If I could recommend approval of this application with, I'm so sorry, you'll have to...
Conditions in the officer report and
Conditions in the officer report
and addendum.
And the addendum and the...
Amended condition 11.
Amended condition 11.
And amended secured by design.
And amended secured by design. All those in favour?
Oh, you need a seconder first? I will second that.
A seconder, sorry, yes. All those in favour? All those against? No abstentions. Thank you, that's carried.
Okie dokie. So moving on to the second application that we have on tonight's agenda, and that is, oh my gosh, here we go. Where is it? Everything. 6.2, 281 Jamaica Road, Southwark, London, SE 16 4RS, pages 101 to 136 of the agenda pack. William, you're very welcome to present, please.
Thank you. So this application relates to the provision of a temporary classroom building on the existing car park for a period of 3 years. The application has been referred to Small Applications Committee as the development is on Metropolitan Open Land. I won't go too much into the detail of the site context because I did it last month and I hope we can all remember. But in short, the site relates to a cluster of buildings on Jamaica Road. They're two-storey buildings with slate roofs, set back from the streets, and the Bosco Centre, which is labelled on the plan on the right, is locally listed. The site is used for a nursery, college and youth clubs. Here we can see context views of the site. The proposed classroom will occupy the middle two parking spaces in that run of four. In terms of background, last month you might remember decided on an application for the nursery extension and reception extension. The application we're here to discuss today effectively facilitates the consented nursery extension by providing a temporary classroom to accommodate children whilst the construction work takes place. This application couldn't be considered at the same time as the nursery extension application because it was received several weeks later. Yep. In terms of consultation, 2 neighbours were consulted through letters, 3 site notices put up and a press notice, and no public representations were received. In terms of the design of the classroom, it's single storey, made out of timber, and at such height and scale it's subservient to surrounding buildings. 3 casement windows either side of a double glazed door. Whilst the design is kind of modern and utilitarian, it's acceptable for a temporary structure hidden from public views. In terms of the site designations, kind of similarly to the nursery extension, the applicant has addressed all the kind of material considerations in terms of flooding, tree measures, archaeological impacts, and ecology. The big thing is that the site is on mole, which is afforded the same level of protection as greenbelt. There are cases when development on mole is considered acceptable as a result of exemptions to the rule, such as this one, where it constitutes limited infilling of previously redeveloped land and won't cause degradation of the green mole. So it's not going to impact any kind of landscaping on the site. The proposed classroom is temporary. It'll only sit on the site for a period of 3 years, and only whilst the building work is happening to construct the nursery extension. In terms of transport, there are 11 car parking spaces on the existing site, 7 on the proposed site with the nursery extension, and 3 on this temporary site. This is kind of considered acceptable. It will help reduce private vehicle use among staff, and no cycle parking is proposed as part of this application because it's been proposed in the nursery extension application. So it's not considered necessary to request any additional parking facilities in this instance. So to summarise, we recommend grant the proposal subject to conditions. The conditions will ensure the proposal is removed after at least 3 years or upon completion of the permanent nursery extension, whichever is sooner. I've just put up the kind of condition word in there for you. It won't remove any landscaping or result in any deterioration of mole. So thank you for listening, and welcome any questions you might have.
Very good. Any questions for the case officer? No, thank you. Do we have any objectors? Do we have the applicant? You're very welcome, sir. Would you like to come forward? Introduce yourself, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes to present. Thank you. I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Darren Coughlin. I'm the principal of Bosco, chief executive of the charity. Does feel a bit like deja vu. I think it was the last meeting I was here. It's quite exciting, this development, because actually it was funded. It's being funded via the council from an early years grant to expand nursery places. So what it means is, we're very, very keen to expand our provision. Obviously, the proposal that you approved last time will take some time. This means that, hopefully by Easter or just beyond, we'll be able to expand our provision by an additional 6 or so places. So, yeah, it's very much, as I said before, it just means we can do what we want to do quicker.
Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? No? All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We don't have any supporters. We don't have any ward councillors. So, colleagues, any further questions for William?
I did just a more general comment, which is we've had a few MOL applications with absolutely no objections coming forward, it might be useful to perhaps look next time we're looking at the scheme of delegation whether we need to have these things come to committee, albeit it'd be useful to obviously have a safeguard in terms of members' call in case there were some issues. But yeah, there's a bit of me which thinks, you know, we've made Mr. Coughlin wait till the end of 2 committee meetings now. Both cases for applications are absolutely no objections for, and yeah, whether we might want to streamline things.
Absolutely. Something that we have discussed with our colleagues in legal. We have to review the constitution and maybe provide for, you know, cases like this to be decided under delegated powers. But you're absolutely right. It's something that we recognize and we've discussed with colleagues in legal.
Is it the same with trees as well? Sometimes they come without.
We are doing the same.
Okay.
I would like to recommend that we grant this application with any conditions cited in the report, follow the officer's recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please?
Pretty much all of us here.
Right.
You choose.
I'll choose. Oh, go on, Sam. All right. Yeah, you don't normally get in there like over there. All those in favour?
Great.
That's carried. Grant. Thank you very much.